welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the 2016 Ohio Bible Quizzing Workshop. And thank you everyone at home that's watching. This also will be recorded, and so if you have anyone that you want to view the video later, please feel free to have them visit the General Youth Division YouTube page, and they'll be able to do that. We're going to get started, and for those that are coming in, we have packets up here on the front. There's 4 papers. Definitely feel free to come up and grab those. We have a lot planned, and we're going to do that in a very short amount of time. And so we're going to get started with what we call the basics of coaching, and we're going to be covering promoting and planning and logistics. And we'll also talk a little bit about the 2016 season that's coming up. And so we want to start with our first page, the starting from scratch document that you have here. And these will be available for download on the website at a later time. This starting from scratch document is something that I created to help new coaches. It's got information about, first of all, what is Bible quizzing and how is it structured. And so let's start at the top. You see that there are 2 divisions in Bible quizzing. There's senior and junior. And then those 2 divisions are broken down into 4 smaller divisions. You have the experienced division, which is all young people 12 to 18. You have the intermediate, which is 12 to 14, or for rookies. And the reason the intermediate division was created was to allow someone an easier transition into senior Bible quizzing. So we really do encourage you, if you have someone that qualifies for the intermediate division, to let them do that so that they can have an easier transition. They learn fewer verses than the experienced quizzers do. And then you see junior and beginner quizzing. The top of this page is so important, and please keep this, please use this. I have questions all the time. My quizzers this old, they've quizzed before, which division they're in, and with just this top of this page, you'll know exactly which division they are able to quiz in. Now, if someone qualifies for beginners, they can quiz in juniors. If someone qualifies for intermediate, they can quiz in experienced. But you cannot have someone jump between junior and senior Bible quizzing. In other words, if you have an 11-year-old, they can't quiz on the intermediate team. Okay? And if you have a 12-year-old, they can't quiz on the junior team. So you can't cross between junior and senior quizzing, but you can go back and forth between experienced and intermediate and junior and beginner. We have a change for our junior Bible quizzing coordinator in Ohio this year. We have Brother Mark Schroeder. He is the pastor in London, Ohio, and so I've added his contact information on this page so that you know how to get a hold of him. And in senior quizzing, my wife and I take care of that ministry, and our contact information is also on that page. But let's talk a little bit about how does Bible quizzing work? What does a season look like? Bible quizzing is a 6-month season from January to June, and it's 1 tournament each month, usually on a Saturday. Except for the very last tournament, state finals, is 2 days long. It's a Friday and a Saturday. The question I'm sure that's burning on all of your minds is, what will the schedule be for this coming quiz season? And we don't quite have that yet. We will soon. It has to be approved with our district calendar, and so that should come out within the next month. But I do want to give you the first tournament date. So please take out a pen. I'll be able to at least give you that much information. All right, everyone ready? So the first senior tournament is going to be Saturday, January 23rd. And for intermediate, that's going to be through Romans 4:25, that's 117 verses. And for experience, that's Romans 5:21, 138 verses. We don't have those same cutoffs for juniors yet, so I do apologize, but that will get you started in seniors. And you will receive an email as soon as the district calendar is finalized so that you'll be able to plan accordingly. Now, you'll probably notice that as far as seniors, that's more verses than we typically have for the first tournament. But what we're noticing more and more is that if you start your season in October or November, and you prepare for the amount of verses that we've set for January, that gives you more time than you have before any other tournament. And so it's really to your advantage to learn more than the first tournament requires. You'll never have more time to plan for a tournament than right now.
Right.
If you learn 2 verses a day between now and the beginning of the first tournament, that's about 100 days. You could be halfway through your material if you start learning now. And so if you learn more verses before the year starts, that's less verses you have to learn during the year. When life gets busier in the spring and the summer, that's a real challenge. So definitely put the work in now, and that'll make for an easier season. Now let's go down a little bit. We have our extravaganzas all set, and so I've tried to lay those out in an organized fashion on your starting from scratch page. Extravaganzas are regional tournaments, okay? So these are tournaments put on by the UPCI Sunday School Division or the UPCI General Youth Division. And there's 4 to 6 of these tournaments around the country, and teams from many other states come to these tournaments. So it's a great time to meet quizzers and coaches from other states, and it's a great opportunity for good competition. In juniors, they actually have 6 of these regional tournaments: Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, North Central, and South Central. I believe the closest one for us in Ohio this year will be the one in Morgantown, West Virginia. And next to that would be the Silvis, Illinois tournament. The senior extravaganzas, there are 4: North Central, South Central, East and West. And it's fairly split between Hazelwood, Missouri, and Raleigh, North Carolina, depending on where you live in Ohio. I really encourage you to go to an extravaganza. We do have a tournament in Ohio in March and April, because I understand that not all teams can go to extravaganza, but I encourage you to do so. So if that means skipping the Ohio tournament that month, I'm okay with that. It's a great opportunity to meet new people and find different competition. Now, let's look at nationals. If you look down a little further, junior nationals is going to be July 25th to 29th. 2016. You'll notice the next day, another important event starts: Senior Nationals. And that's July 30th to August 3rd. We understand that is a logistical problem. One is in Branson, Missouri. The other is in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville. Because of this, the North American Bible Quizzing Tournament, Senior Nationals, is likely going to be starting a little later to give people more time to travel, okay? And you'll find more details for that as we grow closer to the event. But we have the information about Junior and Senior Nationals on there. So what I'd like to do now is talk with you a little bit about how do I get people excited about Bible quizzing at my local church. We're going to talk about promoting. And in my opinion, the best way to promote is to use the resources that are available on seniorBibleQuizzing.com. So let's go to that. We're going to have projected on our screen here a lot of the most important websites that you might find when it comes to Bible quizzing. And so we'll start with seniorBibleQuizzing.com. Now, I'm the senior coordinator in Ohio, so I'm partial towards senior quizzing. Junior quizzing also has resources available, but there's a lot of things that can be used from this website that apply to both ministries. And so this is the homepage of seniorBibleQuizzing.com. And you just saw, scroll through on the banner, something called a Word for Life service. And so let's scroll back a little bit and let's click on that. How many have ever been a part of a Faith Promise service before? Faith Promise, someone comes and encourages you to give to foreign missions. The way they do a Faith Promise service is first they tell you about missionaries, and then they have you fill out a small card. And on that card, they ask you to describe what would be something that you could reasonably give, and what would be a little bit of a sacrifice, and then what amount of giving would be a faith promise. In other words, something that is a sacrificial giving by faith. And so we thought to ourselves, couldn't we do something like this for Bible quizzing or for Bible reading in general? So that's what a Word for Life service is. It's a church service where you ask people to make a commitment toward the Bible. And so we have on this website a full outline of how you can have a Word for Life service at your church. We have a service outline. We have a video you could play during the pre-service time. We have the commitment cards. Let's click on the commitment cards link. And you'll see that we have a very similar card as one that you might see at a Faith Promise service. And so these are services that are not specifically designed for Bible quizzing. These are services that are, we're asking people to commit to bread reading. You can see that the top one is junior or senior Bible quizzing. This is what they're actually filling out at the end of the service. Or they could say, I'm interested in M90, or reading my Bible through in 1 year, or teaching a Bible study, or reading a book related to apostolic doctrine. Then they put their name and their contact information, and then you can follow up with them. And so this is a service in a bag. This is a quick, easy way for you to get people excited about learning their Bible and specifically getting involved in Bible quizzing. So we can back out of that one. There are also graphics for download on this same website that you can display on a projector screen. And so we really have everything that you need all in one. Now let's go back to the top of the screen at the Senior Bible Quizzing website. And let's go to the next tab, New to Quizzing. On this page, we have a little outline on what is Bible quizzing, how does it work, is there an age limit, a lot of the most common questions you might have. And so let's say you have a parent that just wants to learn more about Bible quizzing. Now you have resources that you can give them. They can learn about what is it, how does it work, who can be involved, right here on this website. And back to the top of the screen there, if you go to events, you can see our link to what we're doing right now, the Ohio District Coach Workshop. So this is how people are live streaming back home. And what is Bible quizzing? How does it work? Is it back up to the top? And we have a video archives. Let's go to that. We have videos from the last nationals. Let's say you had someone, they just want to see what does Bible quizzing look like. They can click on one of these videos and watch a quiz that happened at nationals last year. We have our All-Star quiz on here, our prayer and share service, where last year quizzers from across North America shared their testimony and what Bible quizzing meant to them, our awards banquet from last year. So a lot of great videos available for archive, and this is where you will find a copy of today's workshop. Okay, let's go back to the top, and you can see results next. Here, you will find a lot of information about the last North American Quiz Tournament and some of the extravagances that have happened most recently. Now, my favorite tab is at the top under Resources. And this Resources tab is full of information for you to use. And so, starting at the top, you'll have the Unashamed Verse list. And we won't click on that, but on that list, it's all the verses we're learning in senior quizzing this year. We have logos for the 2016 season. You've probably seen the Unashamed logo and the flag, the green flag that's being used this year. You can download those logos, use them in your promotional merchandise, put them on your website, use them on your projector screen when you promote at your local church. We have graphics that are specifically tailored for Facebook, for Twitter. Then we have our perpetual logo. That is the red SBQ that you see right next to me. So you could create a sign like this. All of the resources are available here. They have it in black and white, in two-tone, as well as the shadow that you see on this one. Let's go down a little further. Now, you see on our articles, some articles that were written by some of the most influential people in Bible quizzing's history. And you'll see things from Brother James Beardsley and Brother Lonnie Brown and so many others that have really done so much for Bible quizzing. I encourage you to look through those because these are really some individuals who came before us in this ministry and made it what it is today. Now, we also have documents. The top document, this is so critical. We have a question writers list. So you order questions through BQ Powers, and then your quizzers go through all those questions, and now you need more. That's the list of question writers right there. People from across the country, you email them, you say, I need questions. You send them a check through PayPal. 101 things to do in a Bible quizzing practice. Okay, this is my little pet project, and I'm really excited about this. How many people have used this or seen this? 101 things to do. So this is literally 101 things you can do in your Bible quizzing practice. How many people have been in a quiz practice and you're halfway through the season and now it's the same thing every week? And your quizzers are bored and you're bored and you want something exciting to do. This is full of ideas on things that you can do to spice up your quiz practice. It also has fundraising ideas. And we're actually going to do one of the ideas in this document today when we do our memorization technique workshop. And so I encourage you to download 101 things to do in a Bible quizzing practice. You'll also see a comparison document. Junior and senior quizzing are very similar, but they aren't the same. And there are very important differences in how questions are read, how rulings are made. And so quiz masters think differently in junior and senior quizzing. And so you can download this document, Junior and Senior Bible Quizzing Comparison, to see those differences. We have different learning techniques. We have a studying report. We have things that you can do to be a successful coach, an example calendar for you, example score sheets, all things on the Senior Quizzing website. Now, this is also an exciting thing. Under new programs, down a little further, you see there are 4 different videos on YouTube that directly apply to each one of you. These 4 things are the basics of Bible quizzing. First of all, there's a video that says, what is Bible quizzing? And it does exactly that. That's another thing you can get to a potential parent. Have them watch this video. How to memorize a verse is on these YouTube. So these are instructional videos that we've created at the General Youth Division. How to read a quiz. Coaches, you really want to be able to read a quiz the same way a quiz master does. And you can do that by watching this video. And how to interrupt. These are the basics that a quizzer needs to know to interrupt a question successfully and answer it. Now, how to start a Bible quizzing ministry. This is another really neat resource that's available for download. If this is your first year coaching, download this. How to start a Bible quizzing ministry. It goes from start to finish. It covers the most important websites. How do you structure your quiz practices? What you need is inside this document. How to start a Bible quizzing ministry. Now, let's go down a little further. You see under Coach Workshop, that was last year's Ohio Bible Quizzing Coach Workshop. And so you can go back and view those videos. And now, here's some really neat promotional videos. On our website, we have a list of videos that were created by Brother Ryan O'Neill, who is the promotions director for Senior Bible Quizzing. And these are videos that are about 3 to 5 minutes long. You ask your pastor, Pastor, can I have 5 minutes before our church service here in the fall to promote Bible quizzing? You play one of these videos. It lasts 3 minutes. And then you get up and you say, we're going to start a Bible quizzing team. Anyone who's interested, come to our parent meeting on November 3rd or whenever you're going to have your meeting. And it's an easy way to get people excited about quizzing. We're actually going to play one of those videos for you. It was the video, it's called The Climb, that was played at North American Youth Congress this past year.
The climb out of his tent was different that day as he cast his eyes to the valley of Siddim. Lot began valuing the view of the valley, and the story went downhill from there. But grace broke through the darkness one night outside of his new Sodom home as God gave Lot a higher calling. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the way. Escape to the mountain. Lot faced the same conundrum that this generation does. A desire for the salvation of the mountain with the fear of what comes with the climb. And Lot escaped to the city of Zoar, in between the valley and the mountain, just barely into grace, but not nearly where he was called. And there is a tangent that tries to compromise the culture of the valley and the calling of the mountain. But this is a Caleb generation that proclaims, if God has called me to the mountain, then give me this mountain. And Bible quizzing is the base camp to equip you for the climb. You are called to stand out. The very first command given to humanity was this: tend to every tree of the garden, but do not consume the sinful tree. Adam had to work within sin, but sin was never intended to work within him. Moses, you may be living in Egypt, but you are not an Egyptian. Young lady, when the first bell rings, you may have to come near to the valley, but you are not of the valley. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. But there's a whisper in the winds. How close can you get to the world and still be in the calling of God? Young adults, it's not about where your feet are. It's about where your eyes are. Let's set the record straight. Lot's wife, she didn't turn into a pillar of salt running from Sodom. She turned her eyes after her family made it to Zoar. Her feet were standing in salvation, and she died because of a Snapchat mentality. I'll take a 10-second look into the valley, and nobody will know. It doesn't matter if the rest of the youth group has the app. Remember Lot's wife. When you click on YouTube, remember Lot's wife. When you're out with that young man, remember Lot's wife. The credits roll on a movie that should have never been on your screen, and you ask yourself, if I'm a Christian, how did I entertain myself with that? It's because your feet are in grace, but in your eyes is a wanderlust for the valley. You are called to be a missionary, an apostolic dermatologist, a Christian cellist, a church planner, a witness at your school, a Bible study teacher. Your mountain is bringing your family to God and helping your suicidal friend out of the valley. Your mountain is a very, very big deal. Understand this clearly. The valley wasn't made for you, but the mountain is yours. I'll just wait until next year to prepare myself in the Word of God. I'm sorry, Hannah Montana, there won't always be another mountain. There's one mountain, and you're going up or you're going down. So give me this mountain. I want mountain music in my earbuds. I want less of the valley in my youth service and more of the mountain. I want to have a mountain mindset and wear mountain clothes. Apostolics, it's great if the world admires your mountain clothes, but the reason you wear mountain clothes isn't because they're stylish. It's because you're called to a mountain. Yes, Abraham, the mountain is a place of sacrifice, but when you get there, you realize that God was providing everything you thought you'd lose. Young man, you may be scared to let go of a relationship in the valley, but God has better things on the mountain. So why is Bible quizzing so important? Because there are confrontations on the mountain where only preparation through the Word of God can sustain you. It was on a mountain that Satan offered Jesus all the world, and he would just take one trip to the valley, and Jesus could have answered anything he wanted to. Yet he said, "It is written." When the valley begins to cry, there must be a young person to stand and say,
"It is written, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth."
When you hear the valley sing, stay with me.
It is written, "Come ye, and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths."
But what if you die on the mountain?
It is written, "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain."
But what about the riches and popularity you'll never find on the mountain?
It is written, "Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right."
The mountain isn't as easy to traverse. What if you fall?
It is written, "Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy, for when I fall I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me." It is written, "We are troubled on every side, but not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed."
It's your day. It's your mountain. It's your call. So prepare yourself
These are videos that you can play at your local church. These are videos that will inspire people to learn the Word of God. I just really feel the presence of God right now. Could we just pray for our young people, for our Bible quizzers? Lord Jesus, God, we're so grateful for your Word and for your presence. God, we're so grateful for your faithfulness to us. Lord, help us, oh God, to lead and to inspire. I pray that you would take our young people deeper into your word this year. I pray that you would solidify them in their faith. Let it be a blessing to their family and to their church in Jesus' name. Cover their mind and their spirit in Christ Jesus. You are the first and last. God, we're so grateful for your word. In Jesus' name. And so we have many things like this available on our website. Let's go a little bit higher. Let's go to the top there. We encourage you that really within the next several weeks to do these types of promotions, because it's more advantageous for you to begin your quiz season in October or November rather than waiting until December, because that probably won't be quite enough time for the quizzers to be ready for the first tournament. You'll also find a little bit more about the staff on the GYD on this page. Our director and senior quizzing is Brother Nathan Reaver. Our experienced quizmaster is Brother Russ Fulbear. Our GYD director is Brother Matt Johnson. And we have Brother Ryan O'Neill, our promotions director. Sister Tamara Schultz does so many things for us at the General Youth Division. We're so grateful for her. A little higher on the top, you'll find the Bible Quizzing store, where you can find a lot of things for sale, branded items. Now let's go to bqpowers.com. This next website is where you can buy everything you need to as far as study materials. You can purchase verse cards, laminated material that's color-coded. You can purchase quiz questions, rule manuals, concordances. You can buy software that goes into your computer so that you can reference the verses. Almost everything that you need in your quiz practice can be found at bqpowers.com. And so this is your one-stop shop for Bible quizzing. And you'll also find that link on your handout, stores.bqmaterials.com. So definitely take advantage of these resources that are available. Brother Powers and Sister Powers they were longtime quiz directors and coaches in Texas, and now they are our one provider for all of our Bible quizzing materials. They do a tremendous job. You'll find on your paper some of the things that you'll probably need as a coach. Sometimes I'm asked, what do I need for a quiz practice? And these are the things that I think are really important for any quiz coach to have in their practice. And then as far as quizzers, most quizzers use their flashcards to learn verses. You also have two different versions of the laminated material. You have a version that is 8.5 by 11, standard paper size, and then you have the same exact thing in a pocket size, and these are really great to fit in the backpack or fit in a purse. So both of those, great options. A rule manual is the most important thing that you will ever buy as a coach. Underline that, star that, read the rule manual twice before the season starts, please. A rule manual is the most important thing that you will buy, because that is how Bible quizzing works. It's hard to show up at a tournament and know what to do if you haven't read the rule manual. So please, please purchase your rule manual and review it. Now, how do I register for a tournament? So you're starting a quiz team and it's getting close to January and you want to know, how do I get started? In Ohio, the best way to have all the information you need is to be on my email list. So if you have not been receiving emails, then I don't have you on the list. And I'd like, before you leave, for you to write down your email on our sign-up sheet right here on the front. Okay? Now, if you're from another district, the most important thing to do would be to contact your local district quiz coordinator. And if you're not sure who that is, contact one of your district youth representatives and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. But registering for tournaments should happen 2 weeks in advance. And in Ohio, we have a different price structure, and all of that is outlined on your paper. Now, junior quizzing is going to be led by Brother Mark Schroeder this year, and so you will receive more information from him how to register for a quiz tournament. Brother Schroeder wanted to be here, by the way. He did have a presentation for the Sunday School Committee of the Ohio District, and so that's why he couldn't be here. His contact information is on the front page. Registering for extravaganzas is not done through your district. You register for extravaganza in seniors through the seniorbiblequizzing.com website. And for juniors, stay tuned for more information on that. Oftentimes, you can find that information either on sundayschooldivision.org or on upcquiz.com. They'll have a link as to how you can register for juniors extravaganzas. The last page, nationals. If your team qualifies for nationals at the state district tournament, then your district may register for you. Please ask your coordinator how you should proceed if your team qualifies for nationals. Now, you'll see at the very end of our starting from scratch document, our future verses of study. And so we're looking forward to Romans and James in 2016, and then Acts, and then Galatians, Hebrews, Philemon, and then Bible doctrine, and then Psalms once again. Now, I'd like you to turn to your next page, and that is your percentage point system. This is just for the senior side. At the end of each tournament, we have team awards and we have individual awards. And team awards are based on how you perform during the double elimination tournament, but individual awards can be presented many different ways. The historic way to do that is an average points per game number. And so you take the amount of points you earned, divide that by the amount of games you played, and that's your average. What we've been doing for the last 3 years in Ohio is we determine individual awards through PPS. It's a percentage point system. And it calculates points that you earn while the quiz could still be won or lost. In other words, if the quiz is already locked and you buzz in on the last few questions, the other team wasn't actually competing against you against those questions if they had decided not to buzz in anymore. PPS only calculates points that you earn while the quiz is still competitive or while the quiz still can be won. And so it better identifies who are the top quizzers at that tournament, because the top quizzers are the ones that earn points while the quiz can still be won. And then it extrapolates that number out into a term that we more readily understand. So PPS is easily viewed through upcquiz.com, which is our tournament headquarters. And I've been really pleased with how this has worked in Ohio. Oftentimes it's not a big change, but I do think it better captures who the top quizzers are for that tournament. And so you'll be able to learn a little bit more about PPS by reading through that document. Now let's look at upcquiz.com. So this website was designed by Sister Ruth Wilson, also from Texas, and she is the one that created our software that runs our Bible quizzing tournaments. And so we have a great system. It's one of a kind. And so on a single computer, we can keep track of the score. It runs statistical analysis. It uploads to the website so that someone from home can be watching a quiz live. And it also displays the bracket or the matrix of the tournament on the website. And so if you want to know something about a tournament or how one of your quizzers did at a tournament, or you want to look at their statistics, it'll show you what percentage of questions did they interrupt, what was their 10-point average. You go to this website, you go to the menu, you look up tournaments, and it has a record of all the tournaments we did in Ohio last year and any tournament in any district that uses this software. So it is a great website. There are also games available. So if you have younger quizzers, they have a bubble burst challenge and all kinds of neat ways for your quizzers to review their verses or review the locations of their verses. So definitely check out upcquiz.com. We're so grateful to have that available to us in the Bible quizzing ministry. Now I'd like you to turn to your retrospective study. Okay. So I'll try to make this as exciting as possible. We used to quote in Bible quizzing that if a quizzer quizzes for 5 years or more, a certain percentage of them remain in the church. And I want to know from you, what is the number that you have heard? If a quizzer quizzes for 5 years or more, how high of a percentage remains in the church? What have you heard? 90. Who's heard 90% of Bible quizzers remain in the church? That's the most common one that's quoted. Some people say 80. Well, the General Youth Division sponsored a study to answer that same question. Because that percentage, that 90%, it may be true, but we don't have any record of the study, the parameters for inclusion, how it was done. And so we sought out to find a certain percentage. We wanted to know how many Bible quizzers stay in church when they become adults. And we had no idea what we'd find. If it was 40%, 50, 60, we had no idea. We just wanted to know what it was, because you can't really plan. You have to measure to manage. And so we wanted to know, no matter how good or bad it is, what is the actual percentage, or how close can we get to it? And so we designed a study. We found a roster of every Bible quizzer that was present at the 1997 North American Bible Quizzing Tournament. There were 266 quizzers from 81 teams across 36 districts. And then we sought out to find these individuals, or find someone who knows these individuals, and asked, are they still in church? And we asked it more specifically than that. You can find the descriptions of the particular survey questions inside the document. But we asked, are they in church, essentially? Are they involved in leadership? Did they ever leave church? Did they return after they left? And we were able to actually get information on up to half of the individuals, which was quite a challenge, because this was 18 years ago. These are now people between age 30 and 36. Almost all of them are at different churches. Half of them have a different last name. And so it was difficult to find these individuals, but we found about half. And the conclusion of the study was that about 69%, so almost 70% of Bible quizzers remain in church into their adulthood. Now, if you look at a study done by the Barna Research Group, they found that 41% of millennials remain in church into their adulthood. Now, that isn't specific to our organization. That is across all church groups. But 41% does ring true for many organizations. And so if Bible quizzing's retention is 70%, even though that's less than we thought it was, that's still significantly better than the retention rate for millennials as a whole across America. And so if you take 70% divided by 41%, you find that being involved in Bible quizzing may increase the likelihood that a young person remains in church by up to 70%. And in my opinion, that's very encouraging. And so we can still say to people, get involved in Bible quizzing. It's going to give you a firm foundation in your faith. It's going to give you answers to say when questions of life come. Now, the most interesting thing to me was that of those Bible quizzers who remained in church, 84% are actively involved in leadership or ministry. So these young people who you are mentoring, these are the future leaders of the church. These are the people that are going to be teaching your children and your children's children one day. These are the future pastors and missionaries and evangelists. And so this is a very important investment that you're making. So thank you for what you do. And understand that these are world changers that you're investing in. So that was the study that we did. We're going to continue to do more studies, but I wanted to show you that so that you have a little bit more information to share with other people. Now, once again, I want to give the individuals who came in a little bit later the information regarding our first tournament in Ohio. I do not have the information for all of the tournaments in Ohio because that has to be finalized by the district board. But our first senior tournament will be January 23rd. Location is to be announced. It's going to be 117 verses for the intermediates. That's through Romans 4:25. And it will be 138 verses in experienced. That's through Romans 5:21. That's a lot of verses to start a tournament, so please start learning early. It's really going to make your season a lot easier to learn them ahead of time rather than later. Questions? And for those watching at home, you can ask questions through our comments feed, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the event. Does anyone have any questions about what we've discussed? Yes, right here.
Do we have a date for the first junior tournament yet?
The question was, do we have a date for our first Ohio Junior Tournament? And we don't, unfortunately, but you will be given that as soon as it's made available. I expect within the next month. Yes?
Do we know where the senior tournament is going to be?
The question was, do we know where the location of the first senior tournament is? And we don't. And that will also, you'll have a full schedule available when we send that information out. Any other questions about promoting or the resources we have available, or how to get people excited about Bible quizzing? All right. Thank you so much. We're going to transition to our second session here, and we are so privileged to have Sister Cindy Bounds here. She is one of the leaders of the Anchor Church in Zanesville, Ohio. Her husband is Pastor Aaron Bounds. And Sister Bounds has an unquenchable passion for Bible quizzing. She was a quizzer herself, and when her and her husband came to Zanesville, she made up in her mind that this would be a Bible quizzing church, and she has made that happen in the city of Zanesville. She has been the parent and the coach to nationally award-winning Bible quizzers, and she's a tremendous example of what it means to be a Bible quizzing parent and coach and leader. And so could you give a round of applause to Sister Cindy Bounds?
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Lytle, for asking me to come and speak today. And the sheet of paper that you're receiving is just a, as you can see, pretty open sheet of paper, because I'm going to allow you to take notes. I'm not as much of a lecture style teacher. I'm going to be maybe telling some stories, but I'm going to throw some pointers in there that I hope will help you. And so I wanted to give you a sheet of paper to take notes. So our topic today is parenting a Bible quizzer. And several weeks ago, I started thinking about what are some pointers I can give about how to parent a good Bible quizzer, or maybe some tips on that. And I just kept going back to the same thing. In order to be a good quiz parent, you got to strive to be a good parent. It's right. So many of the things for parenting a quizzer is just for parenting. And so while I am going to talk about quizzing, and I am going to gear some of my points that way, some of the things I'm going to talk about are just basic parenting things that I believe if you'll incorporate with your kids, you'll see the results with quizzing. I think they're so intertwined, and you can't really have a great quiz kid without just parenting a great kid. Well, have you ever had a really delicious meal? You go somewhere, maybe a restaurant or a friend's house, and just taste this amazing meal, and you think, I've got to get that recipe. That was awesome. I want to make that. I like to cook, so I've thought that several times. I'm not much of a baker, but I love to cook, and I'll eat something, and I'll think, I've got to get that recipe. And you go home, and you follow the instructions, the recipe, the ingredients, everything to a T, and it doesn't turn out the way that it did when you had it, when it was so delicious. You think, what did I do wrong? I followed it exactly. Or maybe you've made a delicious meal before and you think, that was really good. I'm going to make that when we have company, and then they'll know I'm a good cook. Because that was really good. I nailed it. And then you go to make it again, and it doesn't taste the same as you made it the first time. You think, oh no. Well, parenting a quizzer is what we're talking about. And parenting a quizzer isn't the name of a wonderful recipe that I can give you exact ingredients for that you can mix together and have this great quizzer. Because it doesn't work like that. Nor is it something I can even expect to turn out the exact same within my own household. Because the first thing a parent of a quizzer must understand is that every child is different. With a recipe, it can be the slightest of things. You maybe used a different brand, or maybe your oven heats a different way, even though you feel like you did the exact same thing, it still turns out different, and sometimes it just works that way. When our second child was born, Sawyer, our son, he as he began to develop, my husband and I quickly realized he was not like Lakin. And we were concerned because Lakin, our oldest daughter, had done everything a little bit sooner than Sawyer was doing. And I can remember asking our pediatrician, is he a little bit behind? Is he going to be developing okay? Is it that he's behind, or is it that Lakin was just advanced? Because I know Brother Spence here, as a first-time parent, all you parents know, when your first child is born, you're pretty sure that they're more advanced than the other kids. I'm sure you've thought, it's okay, because we all have, they're a little more advanced and probably a little cuter. And, you have those conversations, well, I know all kids are cute, and I know all kids are smart, but Erin, she really is. She really is cute. She really does seem to be smarter than I think every parent has that conversation, because we think that first one, we don't have anything to compare it to, and we're just like, they're so great. And so I remember asking him this, is it because Lakin's advanced, or is Sawyer behind? And when Dr. Gupta looked at me, he said, it's neither. And he said, they're just different. They're different. And as a mother of 4 kids now, 2 boys, 2 girls, I realized it's not even a gender thing, because a lot of times, it's because she was a girl and he's a boy. And girls do develop a little more quickly at a young age. And I thought, well, maybe that's what it is. Or maybe it was birth order, because you'll hear, well, they're the firstborn. So they have these qualities. I remember reading Kevin Lehman's book about birth order, and it's good. And there's a lot of things about that were true too. But it's beyond that. It's just that they're different. The whole revolution of every kid being different, academically, socially, physically, and on, will help you as a parent tremendously when you understand the same thing applies for Bible quizzing. Another personal story, when Lakin began to quiz, I quickly thought, she had a natural intellect, and she seemed to just pick up with studying. I remember her first year, we worked with her some, but I remember her first year when they made it to nationals. I can remember sitting out in the audience watching her buzz in what I thought was way too soon on a 2-part question. This is her first national. She's so little. And it was a 2-part question. I'll never forget it. It was Psalm 119, verse 9. Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereto, according to thy word. It was a monumental moment for me as a parent and a former quizzer. She hit on a 2-part question. According to Psalm 119, verse 9, his beep. And she stopped for a minute. She picked up her microphone and she said, his what and thy what? I looked at her and I said, that's got to be it. How does she know that? And then when they rolled her correct, I hugged Aaron and I said, she's got it. And he was like, what do you mean? We're question 11. What are you talking about? I said, no, not this quiz. She's got it. She's got the knack for quizzing. She just heard that. She's 7 and she just heard that pronoun thing. She's got it, and it was like this, and he was like, okay. And I, so I thought, okay, so that was my first, as a parent, moment there. Then Sawyer, having been noticeably different in most areas of his life, wanted to, especially with his academics, it was just different for him. And I remember when he wanted to quiz in 2nd grade, and that's when Lakin started quizzing, was in 2nd grade, but he was even a little older than she had been, and we feared that maybe he wouldn't do well. And as the little brother, I thought, I'm not sure that I want him to quiz because I don't want him to live in that shadow thing. I have to try to be. This was coming off of the year that she had gotten North American Quizzer of the Year, and I thought, and that had something to do with her skills and something to do with her attitude, and she was deserving of it. She's a great kid, but I thought, Cyrus, I don't want him to feel like he doesn't live up to that. And I wondered if I should keep him out of competing for fear he'd be upset. Well, a long story short, to our surprise, he did really well his first year also. But what we found out is what he lacked in one area that she might have had, he made up for it in another area. He had something called a competitive drive. She didn't so much have that, but that kind of made up for it with him. But still, so I learned something with him. He taught me something, but I still had a whole lot to learn. And I learned a whole lot more last year when our third kid started quizzing. Because although Lakin and Sawyer were very different, they both had done really well at the board. But Jillian was my free-spirited miracle that wasn't even supposed to live. And although Jillian's very bright, in fact, academically at this point, probably more advanced than my other two were, but she lacks something else, and that's focus. Jillian lacks natural focus. Now, Jillian, and she doesn't have an ounce of competitiveness in her body, but she learned the Word of God just like Lakin and Sawyer. And she could quote it. What Jillian taught me so much last year that I preached and said that I lived in, and all of that, it became so real as a mom, though, because my first two had done well, and she did well. I mean, she did, but she probably could have done a lot better than what she did if she could have focused. But she was trying her best. She's different than Lakin and Sawyer. Her focus was different. Now, she probably focused on about a third of the questions. And out of that third, she probably got, 70% of it right. I don't know. She was able to focus on probably 5, 6 questions of quiz because she's just doing this and smile. She was totally content with sitting up there smiling and waving at people. Like, don't wave at mommy when you're quizzing. And she would sometimes halfway through the question zone into Brother West and then buzz in and be startlingly and counter wrong because she didn't realize there had been another part of the question she hadn't even been listening to. And But what Jillian helped me understand is why are our kids quizzing? It's easy, especially as a parent, you want your kid to do great, But she helped me understand, she learned the Word of God just the same. She learned it just the same. She could rattle off her verses just like Lakin and Sawyer could. She had that Word of God up here and in here. The result maybe wasn't the same on the board. And I parent them seemingly, you do some things different for some kids, but I parent them seemingly the same, but the results were different, just like those recipes. And it's because my kids are different. And as far as quizzing goes, you'll learn your children require different things to obtain the same level of achievement. So I think one thing you need to do before your quiz year starts with your kids, parents, is decide your goal. What's your goal for your child? Is your goal for him or her to finish the year until the end and make it to state finals regardless of how many verses they've learned? Is it your goal for them to learn 100% of their material? Is it your goal for them to develop good study habits and how to learn the Word of God? All of these are good goals, but they're all very different goals. So you want to be clear in communication with your kid. Talk to them about what mommy's goal is for you, what daddy's goal. This is our goal for you. We want you to learn to study. We want you to learn how to retain. We want you to learn, tell them we want you to overcome maybe some shyness while you're on the board. We want you to learn to focus. We want you what are your goals for your kid? Depending on what your goal is, you'll set your requirements at different places. And at any level, you'll want your kid, you want to decide maybe the priorities because we live in a very flexible, very multitasking generation. And because of that, we're very flexible. Sometimes we're overly flexible. In the ministry, you have to be flexible. And sometimes that's hard when you're finding balance because you want to have structure. Quizzing, like anything, if you want to be successful, you've got to be consistent. Consistency is kind of the key to anything, and especially Bible quizzing. So consistency is hard to have when you don't have structure. So you want to develop a structure early on, what you're going to do with your kids, how you're going to work with them. And I think with every home and every parent, it's different because your schedules are different one from the other. There are pros and cons to everyone's schedule. I have the benefit, I'm schooling my children at home. So I've not incorporated quizzing into their school year before, but what I am able to do is before our school day gets started, maybe do our devotion on quiz material. And then this year's the first year I've ever incorporated quizzing into schoolwork. For Sawyer's penmanship, I'm having him write out verses because he needs a lot of work on his penmanship. And it's like, oh, we'll kill two birds with one stone. We'll let him write verses. So there are different things you can do. Even if you don't school your children, when they come home, you can incorporate quizzing into their homeworks. You can find different ways to incorporate it in, because for our very busy, multitasking, flexible generation, you have to not be so rigid if you want to be successful. You can't say, we're going to practice every day from 4 to 5. And that could be reasonable for your family. I doubt it in the world that we live in. Most of us, every week something different happens, whether it's an emergency, you have to go to the hospital with the family, or maybe you're at a funeral viewing, or maybe you're at a birthday party, or something. It seems like every week, the normal is to be abnormal. It would be abnormal to actually have a normal schedule, right? Because we're busy. And so I think you have to be willing to adjust your schedules a little bit for quizzing. Shake it up. You know, maybe you'll quote your verses on the way to where you're going. Or maybe you'll do some in the morning, some in the, find different ways that you can incorporate it instead of just having a set time every day. Oh, it's quiz time, we gotta do this right now. Consistency is great, but like I said, because of the society, have another plan, have a backup plan. If things get messed up, where can I squeeze this in at? And work it to make it a priority. And like I said earlier, I was gonna talk about some quizzing tips, and I hope to throw some in there, but I really felt when I prayed, I felt to talk about something that I talked to our church about a couple years ago. I spoke on Mother's Day. And I just kept feeling this story. And this isn't directly, obviously I was speaking it to parents, but it's about parenting. And I think it's applicable for parenting quizzers. I think sometimes parents say, why am I doing this? Oh, here's another year. I've done that. I think we've all, I sure want to do this. It's a huge commitment. It's not even like Little League Baseball, or this is a sport, if you will, that lasts almost all year, about 9 months or so out of the year. It's a big commitment. And although we all want to get the Word of God in our hearts, you think, oh, is there another way I could do this? Is there? And the reason I love Bible quizzing is because I do feel like it's the best way. It makes us accountable. We can all say, well, if we're not quizzing, we're still going to make sure our kids study the Word, but probably they're not going to get as much memorizing in their heart ultimately as they would under the strict, aggressive form of Bible quizzing. So I like it for that. It keeps me accountable as a mom that I'm fulfilling Scripture commandment of Deuteronomy 6. And I like that. But I feel like a lot of times parents say, why quiz? Why isn't there something else? What about Sunday school? What about children's church on Wednesday? Why do I have to make this commitment? Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I talked to our church about a couple years ago. And what I titled it that day is Soccer Moms. And I'm not going to go through my whole message from that day, but I want to tell you a little bit about what I shared with them that day. It was the year of 1314, and English towns were abuzz with a new pastime. The sport they called soccer would have town against town with hundreds of players on each side brawling across fields and down the roads. It was so popular that it came to the attention of King Edward II, who eventually issued a royal decree banning England's newest craze. Soon other kings followed suit. Edward II, Richard II, King Henry IV. All of these kings banned what they called an unprofitable sport. But what was it about a game that made kings willing to imprison the people that played it? And a closer study into this will reveal that the true source of frustration was not what England's citizens were doing with their time. It's what they were not doing. because soccer, according to the English records and the monarchs, was distracting the men from the practice of archery. And if England was going to be able to defend itself against its ever-growing list of enemies, its citizens had to be skilled in the use of the bow and arrow. Soccer was a great game, but it was distracting the citizens from their most vital source of defense. The skill that would give them an edge in any battle was archery. Perfecting their expertise with the bow and arrow and honing their skills of defense, they had allowed themselves to get distracted by entertainment. Kind of like soccer moms. You know what soccer moms are, right? You got to run them to piano practice, got to have them at quiz practice, choir practice. You know, soccer moms are taking them there. We're busy doing stuff, but maybe not spend a lot of time with our kids on what we're supposed to. They had lost their focus on the big picture of defending the nation of England. Archery changed warfare because before the invention of the bow and arrow, wars or conflicts always had to be settled in hand-to-hand combat. So it was the inventions of the bows that allowed weapons to be directed to long distances. And having skilled archers in your forces was a significant wartime advantage. It's with this knowledge that Solomon gave the metaphor of the bow and arrow, because it was him that said in Psalms, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man," which meant an archer, "so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall never be ashamed. They shall speak with the enemies in the gate." Children truly are a gift from God. And children are like arrows, and the bow has no purpose without the arrows. I've bow hunted just a couple of times, and my husband he hunts with a bow and arrow. Sawyer and Lincoln have killed a deer with a bow and arrow. If you have a bow but you don't have arrows to shoot them, when you they're useless. But the arrows, when properly aimed by the archer, they're able to overcome any enemy. And the implication in that passage of scripture really was about the arrows. If a parent or an influencer, maybe a quiz coach, will impart the right knowledge and will supply the right direction, a child can be empowered to meet any enemy. In the Old Testament, they were at war a lot. You ever read passages in the Old Testament, they were at war again with Israel, and they were at war again with Israel. They were at war again with Israel. It seems they were at war all the time. In Deuteronomy, Moses is talking about wartime, and he says, when you go out to battle against your enemy. He didn't say if. He said when. They had to utilize every resource they had. A big advantage they had was the Benjamites, because Moses had blessed Benjamin and declared that he was the beloved of the Lord. Benjamin means beloved of the Lord. And that he would dwell safely by him. But it was the writer of Chronicles that later revealed to us what was so special about the Benjamites. Because it was in Chronicles that you hear the Benjamites were so gifted with the bow and arrow. They were just as good with their left hand as they were with their right hand. And the knowledge of the bow was passed down from generation to generation. I think Daddy and Mommy Benjamin would go out into the fields of the evening, and they would make sure that their skills were good with the bow and arrow. Do you understand the analogy here? They made sure that they were skilled in their means of survival. This was the way they warred. Saul and Jonathan came to the Benjamite tribe. David did his part in passing down this knowledge too, because when he received the word of their death, he immediately lamented and bid all the people of the land to teach their children the bow. He commanded the story of the bow to be told in their honor. Another Benjamite we might read about that doesn't talk about a bow and arrow would be Mordecai. You don't reference him as a great warrior, but the knowledge of his tribe is evident in his actions because he had given Esther the knowledge she needed to defeat the enemy. The story of Esther is full of evidence that she had regular communication with her parents as to what her actions should be. When life planted an enemy in her path, she knew what to do. He had guarded her and grounded her in truth. It's just like the analogy with the bow and arrow. He had taught her how to survive against the enemy. Benjamites always in scripture worked with their children in archery because they knew that their survival depended on it. And that's how they would overcome the enemy. And it's just like us today with our children. We've got to teach them their means of survival against the enemy. It's the word of God. And Samuel came along later and makes this analogy clear to us again when he said, children are like arrows, and if you direct them properly, they'll defeat the enemy. And, make no mistake, There is an enemy, and he is after our children. He might have acquired new weapons, but his intent is the same. It's to kill, steal, and destroy our kids. Arrows are an offensive weapon, and the bow directs and shoots right to the target. Through Bible quizzing, we have the opportunity to equip a whole generation of little arrows. Individuals maybe who aren't wiped out yet by adversity. Parents wear the weight that can tip the scale. So kids grow and they get friends at school, but still your parents have the most influence on you. And God's very first instruction to parents we'll find in Deuteronomy chapter 6 when he tells us to talk of the scriptures when you wake up, all throughout your day, when you're lying down at night, all the time. We're to talk about the scriptures. Now, how many parents do that if you're not involved in quizzing, right? Quizzing keeps us in check. I told my husband, I said, every time I thought maybe I'll take a break from quizzing, I think of that passage of scripture and I think, I don't know if I would be fulfilling my scripture commandment to parents. That's not saying people that don't Bible quiz aren't in the, aren't great people and aren't doing a good job parenting. I'm not saying that. But for those of us that have been exposed to quizzing and have been around it, and or maybe those of you that are new, you'll quickly learn this quizzing helps you be a better parent. Because it helps you to fulfill scripture order, scripture commandment, and that's to teach your children all day long. Should be saying verses constantly. And that's where I feel like this generation of soccer moms has missed it because we get so busy doing stuff. And you can even get busy doing quizzing and miss the point. The points have the word of God in your heart. We want our children to be equipped. I want my children to make it ultimately. And I want my children to be able to teach other people how to make it. And when they've got the word of God in their heart, they can do that. And, Sawyer is just 9. And he just recently, our neighbor came to the door and he said, how's Mrs. Dozer? And he said, oh, she's not doing very well. She's in the hospital with her knee. And he's in his 80s. And he said, well, would you care to come in and have a word of prayer with me so we can pray with him? And he started praying. And I just feel like, and he told George, he calls him Brother Dozer. And I'm sorry, it's Mr. Dozer. And he says, well, Daddy says, if you speak what things are what you want them to be, he said, and I think George is going to be a member of our church. And I'm like, okay, well. And anyway, it was in our kitchen where Sawyer and my husband were praying with him, and George got the Holy Ghost. And but he quotes scriptures, and he might not have caught on the way that Lakin was, and he might not be quizzing the way she was. And already this year, we're just getting started, but already Lakin said, oh, Mom, these verses are hard to keep in my brain. I'm having a harder time this year. And she said, they're hard, and I'm going to do it. But she's really focused on some things with school. And I said, it's fine. The focus isn't, we want to win. Hey, I love to win. I'm competitive. I like to win. Who doesn't like to win? But I've got to be real careful. Jillian really helped me last year. I want to be careful that we're not quizzing to quiz. Quizzing to get the word of God in them. And Lakin said, I do want to quiz. I want to quiz, but I'm focused on a couple of things with her creative writing. I said, that's fine. Honey, I'm not putting expectations. I have to try to be. I want you to get the word of God in your heart. So as long as you're learning these verses, I'm proud of you. And that almost broke my heart because I thought, I don't want her for a second to think that I'm not just as proud if she doesn't do as well on the board with that. I want her to learn how to be competitive. I think it's good for kids to learn how to compete in strategy. That's life. We have to learn those things. But quizzing, we analyze it next to sports because it's a lot like it. But quizzing is not football, and it's not Little League. It's Bible quizzing, and it is important. At the end of the day, I just don't want to be a soccer mom that's busy being busy, even just busy taking quotes and marking off my agenda. So how to parent a Bible quizzer is how to parent a kid. Be consistent. Love them. And talk to them about what their expectations are and what your expectations are. And get the word of God in their heart. And let's see the fruits of it, because you can be a great Bible quizzer and not a great Christian. So we want our kids to be great leaders and great Christians and not just have trophies. Those are really fun and really exciting and really nice. But when Lakin's 21, I don't want her just to be a box of trophies in my basement and her not have gotten it.
Right.
Because what I thought she got when I saw her answer that first question, she got, and that was a knack for quizzing. But what I want to be able to say, she got it, is that she got what the point of it was.
Amen.
So to how to parent a Bible quiz, and I feel like the best thing I can just say is how to be a good parent. And just love your kids, love them through it, encourage them, and make sure we don't compare our kids to other kids. Because they're normal. Hey, how many adults compare yourselves to others? The Bible tells us not to, and he wrote that in there for a good reason, because he knew we would. He knew we would struggle with that. It's natural. We want to be better, and you do need to strive to be better, and you teach your children to strive to be better, but do it in the right manner, and do it with love, and just love your kids. I think it's going to be a great year, and I'm looking forward to learning even more from my children this year. God bless you.
All right, that concludes our memorization technique workshop, so everyone can find their seat. Thank you for our participants. How about a round of applause for our 12 participants? So for those watching at home, what we just completed was a memorization technique workshop, and we had 4 stations. And the groups memorized verses differently at each station. We had repeat after me style, where a moderator says parts of a verse at a time, and they repeat after them. We had a singing verse station, where you sing the verse and they sing it back. We had writing and typing the verse, and so that was teaching themselves by writing or typing the words. And we had learning your own using a flashcard, and that was another way to teach a verse to yourself. And so let's recap. Whose favorite station was repeat after me? Several, yeah, I'd say about a third. Whose favorite station was singing the verse? We had about a fourth of those. Whose favorite station was writing or typing the verse? Yeah. And whose favorite station was just you and your flashcard learning that way? Yeah, about a fourth of the people. And that's how I used to learn. There was a different, some person of those 12, their favorite station was a different station. And so it's so important as a Bible quizzing coach or a parent that you understand your kids might learn 4 different ways. They might have a way that we didn't even do here. On the seniorBibleQuizzing.com website, there is a resource that describes how to learn a verse. It's memorization techniques. And there's several different ways, and it outlines them. There's the phrase 10 method, which is repeating the phrase 10 times, similar to the repeat after me style. There's writing and typing. There's the whole verse method, which is reading the whole verse, not looking at it and trying to repeat what you just did. And so it's not breaking it down into pieces. It's doing it all at once. There is not a wrong way to learn a verse. The only wrong thing you can do is not review the verse, because you will lose it if you don't practice. I made it my personal goal as a Bible quizzer never to go 2 days without memorizing the verses. And so if you have young people that are going 3, 4, 5 days or longer without memorizing all of their verses, it's gone. You're starting from scratch on that verse. And so these things have to be repeated. Deuteronomy 6:4, and these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. As Sister Bounds alluded to, Bible quizzing becomes a part of your everyday life when you're part of this program. It is not a once a week or a once a month thing. It is every day. It permeates itself. As you're driving down the car, they have their flashcards. They have their flip books. They're reviewing every chance you get. You're getting ready for dinner. Every moment of every day is an opportunity to review these verses. And that's how they really stick. Something really important you might have noticed. It's just as important to remember the location as it is the verse itself. So many of the questions in Bible quizzing are tailored for the location. And so you not only have to know unique words, unique beginnings, unique endings, unique phrases, you've got to know whether it's Romans 1:16 or James 5:4. It's a big difference. And so encourage your quizzers as they memorize to say the location every time. They can say it at the beginning and the end every time. They really have to know that as well. That's going to be a big advantage once they get into quizzing. Now, does anyone have any questions or comments? And once again, to remind our viewers at home, if you have any comments, please leave them on the comment section. We'll be checking that periodically throughout the event. Yes, question?
Where did you say that the list of memorization material is found?
Yes, that's on seniorBibleQuizzing.com under the Resources tab. In fact, Randy, if you could bring that up, seniorquizzing.com, we'll bring up the web page there. And there's a video version and there's a web document version, a PDF. And so we'll show that to you while we pull that up. Questions? Any other questions or comments or something you learned about yourself while you were doing your memorization workshop? So we have our page, and if you scroll down on the Resources tab, a little bit further there, and just below Articles, right there, you see that there is Learning Techniques, parentheses PDF. It's the fourth bullet down under the document section. That is the memorization technique page. And so you have 4 different ways to learn a verse. And then if you go under the videos section, the new programs, how to memorize a verse. It's the second bullet down. It actually shows an interactive, or not an interactive, but a recorded video on YouTube, how to memorize some scriptures. All right. So we're going to move into a session that I'm very excited about, and it's titled, How to Coach in a Tournament. We practice. We read quizzes in our local churches. We memorize verses at home. You register for the tournament and you show up, and now what do? You're a coach. You're sitting behind your quizzers for the first time, and the quiz master is reading the questions and your quizzers are buzzing in or not buzzing in. And you want to know, how do I help them? What do I do? How do I use timeouts? What am I supposed to be doing as a coach? And so we're going to have Brother Austin Spann come. Brother Spann is our intermediate quiz master and our beginner quiz master in the state of Ohio. He quizzed for 9 years in the city of Dublin, and he is actually the one that won me to the Lord while we were in high school together. And that's how I joined Bible quizzing. Austin has been a coach for over 7 years, and he has a wealth of experience. And so he and I are both going to do this next session together, but he's going to take the lead. And so could you give a round of applause to our next speaker, Brother Austin Spann.
All right. How to coach in a tournament. When it comes to coaching, we all know that the hard work and probably the most important work you do is what happens during the week and during your practices and everything. Because you can take the brightest young person in the world, and if they haven't learned any verses, you can bring them up to the quiz. They're not going to be able to answer any questions if they don't know verses. So you've got to do it. Most of the coaching is what happens during the week, but that doesn't mean it's not important to know what you're doing in a tournament. Because if you're a coach, the last thing you want is for your quizzers to put in all that hard work and to do everything they need to do to win a quiz, and then they lose because as a coach you messed up and you didn't tell them what they were supposed to do correctly. It's a terrible feeling when you feel like you might be the reason that your quizzers lost a quiz. So it's important to know what you're doing up there and to know some of these different strategies so that you can put your quizzers in the best position for them to be able to win quizzes at the tournaments. So we're going to go, the first thing we're going to talk about here is the quizzer arrangement at the board. And along with that, I'm going to kind of hit on some of the how to handle quizzers who maybe you don't want them to hit all the 10 pointers and some things like that. So if you have 2 or 3 quizzers on your team, how you arrange them becomes a pretty easy thing to do. because they're all going to be sitting up there with the buzzer in their hand the whole time. So it's really not too difficult. It's just a matter of who's sitting at which spot. When you've got 4 quizzers or 5 quizzers, it becomes a little more difficult and you have to do a little more balancing. Most coaches want for all of their quizzers to get a chance to get into the quiz. If they're learning their verses, you don't want them to have to sit back and never get a chance to quiz if they're wanting to get into the quiz. So how you handle that? Let's say that you've got 2 quizzers that know all of their verses, and then you've got 2 quizzers that maybe they don't know as much, and you know that they probably won't be hitting a lot of questions. This is a pretty common thing that happens among teams. So how do you get those quizzers? How do you make sure that they each get a chance to quiz? Some coaches will just do an every other quiz type of thing. And most of the time, if you have the 2 quizzers that know all of their verses, a lot of times you'll leave them in the whole time and you'll let them quiz for the whole quiz. And those other 2 quizzers, you'll switch in and out. So some coaches will just switch every other quiz. This quizzer is going to quiz, the next quiz, the other one will. Some coaches will switch them out in the middle of a quiz. So somewhere right around the middle of the quiz, maybe question 10, they call a timeout or a substitution timeout, and they'll switch in a quizzer so that each quizzer gets to quiz in every single quiz. Or sometimes what I've done most often is kind of a combination of those 2. I'll have a different quizzer start the quiz, and then in the middle I'll switch them out, but I'll switch every other quiz. Which quizzer gets to start the quiz? That way each quizzer gets a chance to hit some 10-pointers, or each quizzer gets a chance to hit some 30-pointers. So we'll switch them out like that. That's kind of if that's how your team arrangement is, where you've got those 2 strong quizzers and you want them in the whole time, that's something you can do. Sometimes you may not want your strongest quizzer in the whole quiz. So in junior quizzing, it's 6 questions to quiz out. In senior quizzing, it's 8 questions to quiz out. And you don't want, if you have one quizzer that knows their material better than all the others and they're the best at answering questions, you don't want them going in and getting all the 10-pointers and being done quizzing after the 10-pointers. You want them in the quiz for a longer time. So how do you account for that and help them, or help your team put them in the best situation? Sometimes teams will actually not start that strong quizzer. If they've got that quizzer that they want to make sure they're in at the end, sometimes they'll put in that 4th or 5th quizzer and they'll give them a chance in the 10-pointers. They'll start off with them and let them try and get some 10s, and then they'll bring in that strong quizzer later in the 10s, or even after the 10-pointers, they'll switch them in. You do want to make sure to get them in there. Sometimes I've seen coaches where they feel like they're on a roll and their team's getting a bunch and they don't put that strong quizzer in at any point because they think they're winning, so they want to hold on to that. You want that strong quizzer to get in there, especially since they probably put in the most work. So you want to make sure that they get in there. But sometimes you may not start them in there. You can use that substitution timeout when you have to do that. That's a great, the substitution timeout was a great implementation they put in quizzing. It didn't used to be there. You have to use one of your 2 timeouts if you wanted to switch out a quizzer. And some coaches didn't like using their timeout for that. But we've got a substitution timeout now. So now there's some different things that you can do with that substitution timeout. And some of them are some different strategies that you can use. Sometimes I've seen coaches use the substitution timeout because their quizzers in the 10-pointers weren't quizzing the way that they wanted their quizzers to. So I've seen it both ways, both good and bad. I've seen quizzers where they were just real excited. They get in a quiz and they interrupt the first 3 questions of the quiz and get them all wrong because they're really excited, but they're just a little too jumpy. And so a coach will have to call a substitution timeout and actually take them out of the quiz. That way they don't have to use their timeout after question 3 to tell their team, you need to slow down a little bit. And so they can use that substitution timeout to their advantage, pull that quizzer out, and then you can always put them back in later. You can call your timeout a little bit later in the quiz and put them back in if you want. But that's a good strategic use of that substitution timeout. I've also seen it go the other way where a quizzer gets too many right. And it may be because the coach forgot to tell them, I don't want you to hit more than one 10-pointer, and all of a sudden they've hit the first 3, and you realize, oh, they're just going to keep going. Some coaches will call a substitution timeout then, and they will pull that quizzer out and say, all right, I just needed you to hold off on the 10s. We're just making sure our camera is still going. So that's another use of that substitution timeout. That's a little different than the normal use. The normal use is just in the middle of a quiz, you use your substitution, sub in a quizzer that's been sitting out. If you don't have more than 2 or 3 quizzers, then unfortunately you can't use that substitution timeout. So you just have to tell your quizzers what they're doing beforehand and hope that they listen to you and that they follow what you're supposed to be doing. So let's go into, with those, we talked about how sometimes you don't want a quizzer to get too many 10s. How do you know how many 10-pointers they should get? This is a little bit tougher sometimes. And I will say this, with any coaching strategy, it comes down to your individual team. So I'll say that right away. Quizzers are different, just like Sister Bounds was talking about. All quizzers are different. They handle pressure differently. They may know their verses differently. So you have to judge how your individual team is. But in general, how do you know how many 10-pointers to let let's say your strongest quizzer, if you have one quizzer that needs to be held out, how do you know when to hold them back? First of all, what this is, the reason for holding them back in the 10s is because you want them in the quiz at the end when you've got your 30-point questions, you've got your toughest questions. You want to make sure that they're in the quiz able to answer those questions. That gives your team the best chance of getting those. So if it comes down to it and you need one of the 3 30s, you want that quizzer to be in there and not to have to rely on the quizzers who don't know their material as much. So you want them in there at that point, and you don't want them quizzing out too early. So if it's juniors and they get those first 6, then they get their 70 points and they're out. You prefer, if they're going to be able to hit any question in that quiz, you want them to get the higher point values. So the way that you should be kind of determining how many 10s they get is kind of where you think they're going to quiz out. So the mistake that I see a lot of coaches make, or that I have seen in the past, is they hold a quizzer out because they know that this is their strongest quizzer. And they say, all right, this is my strongest quizzer, so I'm not going to let them get any 10-pointers. I'm going to have them wait till 20s and 30s. And then they consistently get 4 questions in a quiz. You're probably holding them out too much if they're never quizzing out. Because that's the whole purpose of holding them out, is you don't want them to quiz out too early. So that's how you know how many 10-pointers they should get. If they're never quizzing out, then you're holding them out too much. Let them get one of those 10-pointers. And then they also, for quizzing, if they quiz out, they get a bonus 10 points. So that's another 20 points that you're adding on to your team score by having them quiz out.
Also, that makes me think of UPCquiz.com. Maybe you don't know how many questions your quizzers get per quiz. You can go on UPCquiz.com, look up the tournaments they've quizzed in, go down to their statistics, and it'll tell you how many questions they average per quiz, how many 10-pointers, 20-pointers, 30-pointers they average, what's their percentage correct for each of those types of questions, what's their percentage interruption, and how does that affect whether they're successful or not. So definitely take advantage of UPCquiz.com for that.
Yeah, use the tools that you have. So your quizzers, that's how, in general, for those 10-pointers, that's how you want it to, that's how you want to know, or how, I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. That's how you know how many 10-pointers they should be getting, is based on where they're at toward the end of a quiz. So likewise, if you have a quizzer that you're consistently having to call timeouts in the 20s because all of a sudden you're only 3 20s in and they're about to quiz out, and you have to keep calling timeouts to tell them wait till the 30s, maybe you hold them back a little more. If you're having to stop them from answering 20s, then that means they're able to get those higher point value questions anyway. So that's kind of how you judge about when to let a quizzer back into the quiz, or when to hold them out in those 10-pointers. Any questions over that, or any other tips before I move on? Yeah.
Are you only allowed to substitute one player at a time? Or can you like substitute all three if you have like 6 quizzers for one team?
That's a good question. The question was, are you allowed to sub them all at once, all of your quizzers, or can you do one at a time or sub them all? So you won't ever have 6 because then you'd have to have 2 teams. So 5 is the most that you can have on a team. During a timeout, you can sub both of them in at once. If you want to do that, if you have 2 quizzers you want to pull out and stick in 2 new ones, then that's okay to do.
You can also, during a normal timeout, you can rearrange all of your quizzers. And so if your captain's coming in, you want your captain to be sitting at red 1 or yellow 1, you can rearrange the order. Every time you substitute, though, you have to notify the scorekeeper of what you're doing so that they have everything correct in the computer.
How many substitution timeouts are you allowed?
You get 1 substitution timeout per quiz. And then, of course, you can always sub in during the regular timeouts as well. And going off of something Jay said, that reminded me, your strongest quizzer, most often you will see them placed at seat 1. That's the most common thing. It's not always, but most commonly, seat 1 is your captain, whoever's sitting at number 1. And so whenever there's a contest by one of the other quizzers, they have to go and talk to the captain. And so that a lot of times you want your stronger quizzer to be at that 1 chair. They can also call timeouts if you choose. As a coach, I very rarely let my quizzers call timeouts, but there are some cases when that may happen. So a lot of times you want your strongest quizzer or your most experienced quizzer, it may be. It may not necessarily be the one that knows the most material, but one that knows the rules the best. In senior quizzing, there was also the rule that your team, if there's a tie and it's just quizzers on your team, that the captain gets to pick who answers the question. In that case, I would want a captain who is experienced to make that decision for me. So most commonly, you'll see the strongest quizzer at seat 1. Not always, but that's the most common thing. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll move to the next topic here, timeouts. How to use your timeouts. There are different, once again, this is very much dependent on your individual team and what's happening in that individual quiz. I cannot tell you that these are the times you call timeout every quiz, and that's how it should be. It's very dependent on what's going on in that quiz. One use of timeouts that is very common is when the other team, all of a sudden, they get on a roll, and let's say they get 3 straight 20-pointers, a lot of times a coach will call a timeout to kind of slow down that momentum. Momentum is a thing in Bible quizzing. Quizzers get on a roll. And so sometimes a coach will call a timeout to kind of break that up a little bit and take a minute. It's also good for your quizzers because sometimes when the other team gets 3 in a row like that, and your quizzers, some quizzers will, at that point, they'll hold off and they'll say, I can't beat this quizzer. I'm not even going to try. Other quizzers think, oh, they got 3 in a row. I need to speed it way up. And then they end up missing the next question and giving the team a reread, and that only compounds your deficit. And so sometimes when the other team just gets on a roll like that, it's good to just call a timeout, regather, regroup, and go back into the quiz. So that's a very common use of a timeout. With that, what you don't want to do is do that to your own team. If your quizzer gets 3 in a row, you probably don't want to use your timeout right then unless you need them to wait until a higher point value. You don't want to stop your own quizzer who's on a roll and give the other team that same chance that we were talking about to regroup and to get back in there. So you want to be careful and not hurt your own team by calling a timeout. Sometimes it's more strategic not to use a timeout. A lot of coaches feel like I've got these 2 timeouts, I need to use them. Sometimes it's okay to not use them. Some of my favorite quizzes as a coach that I was in were times when we were quizzing a good team, and they're 2 teams that are pretty even, and they're going at it all quiz, and neither coach calls a timeout almost the entire quiz. I loved that when that happened, because what you're doing is you're just letting your quizzers do it. You're letting your quizzers go at it, and hopefully your quizzers know I just need to do my best on every single question. I enjoyed those quizzes when I could just let my quizzers do it, and usually there's a timeout in the 30s if it's that close of a quiz. At some point, you're going to want to let your team know where they're at. But it's okay sometimes to just let them go at it. You don't have to use those timeouts just because you feel like, well, I haven't used one yet. Sometimes it's okay to do that. So I have here, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. What I have here is kind of like a little scenario for us, a case study here. And it might be hard for you to see, so I'll kind of describe what's going on here. This is a quiz. They are through the 20-point questions. I have up here a junior score sheet, but it works the same if it was seniors. We'll say it's the same score. So we're going into the 30s. We've got 3 30-pointers left. The red team has 110 points. The yellow team has 75 points. So what we have here is it's a 35-point difference. So that's the first thing you need to know as a coach. What's the difference in the score? We're at this point, if say I'm gonna act as the red coach, I know that my team's up by 35 points. The next thing I need to know is the points remaining in the quiz. So at this point, there are the 3 30s. That's easy math. That's 90 points. I've got 90 points left. My team's up 35. We read question 13 or 18 if it's seniors, the first 30-pointer. And let's say my team gets it as the red coach. What do I do then? Well, now my team is up by 65 points, and I know that my points remaining is 60, so this is a very easy call for me. I'm calling a timeout because my team just locked the quiz. So we use the term locked. When we say a quiz is locked, that means if your team does not interrupt and miss any more questions, that your team is guaranteed to win. We don't take fouls into account because fouls don't happen very often. And let's hope that at this point your quizzers are just sitting there and doing what they should be. So we don't take fouls into account. But in this case, if the red team doesn't do anything else, they've won the quiz. Now, there's one thing I would need to check first, because I know if I see that, oh wait, I'm up by 65, there's 60 points left. One thing that I need to check is the yellow team. I need to see if any of their quizzers are about to quiz out. That's something that coaches forget sometimes. If one of those quizzers on the yellow team only needs 1 or 2 more to quiz out, then it is not locked, because even by sitting there, we're not guaranteed to win. If one of those quizzers quizzes out, they could then win by 5 points. So I need to pay attention to the difference in score, the points remaining, whether or not someone is about to quiz out. I need to look at all of those things.
The reason quizzing out is so important is you get 10 bonus points if you quiz out. In other words, if you get 6 questions right in juniors, 8 questions right in seniors, so that 10 bonus points could mean the difference between the quiz.
Right. So that red team, after question 13, they're probably going to call that timeout, assuming no one on the yellow team can quiz out. And even if someone on the yellow team can, sometimes you may want to call that timeout to let your quizzers know what's going on. If I'm the coach of the yellow team and that first 30-pointer, let's say the same thing happened, the red team got it, what do? I probably don't want to call a timeout. That's probably the last thing I want to do, because the other team just locked it. If their coach happens to be asleep and isn't looking at the score right, or their coach doesn't realize it, I probably don't want to be the coach of both teams and try and tell them I want to help my team. So I probably don't want to call a timeout at that point. That's the other coach's job. That's what they're there for, is to call a timeout and let their quizzers know that you don't need to not interrupt these last 2 questions. So an interruption, that's a big point swing. That's a 45-point swing if they interrupt and get it wrong and your team gets it right. So if the red team were to interrupt one of those last 2, they would unlock the quiz, and the yellow team would then have a chance to win again. So again, I've got a chance to win the quiz. So I'm probably not going to call a timeout when the other team locks it in that situation. Now, I'm not saying that every time the other team locks it, you never want to call a timeout, because sometimes they'll lock it on going into the last question and they're up by 50 points. And oh, well, there's no chance I'm going to win. I need to calm my quizzers down. They're upset. Sometimes it's okay to call a timeout when the other team locks it. But just looking at it, in that situation, it's the red team that would need to. And again, if a quizzer on the yellow team had been about to quiz out, then they would need to call that timeout. let's say that yellow 1 had 4 correct, or if it's seniors, they had 6 correct, and I need them to quiz out on the last 2 questions. I'm going to call a timeout, and I'm going to tell my other teammate, the other team members, do not touch your buzzer. This is for yellow 1 only, because we need them to quiz out in order for us to have a chance to win. So in this case, I'm telling my other quizzers, you take your thumb off the button and just put it beside there, and you let this, in this case, yellow 1 is, we need them to get the questions to give us those extra 10 points.
We had several times in state finals and at nationals where a team lost because the quizzers did not know that it was locked. The quizzers, they had won the quiz. If they just sat there, they would have won it. But they didn't know, so they kept interrupting, they kept getting negative points, and the other team ended up winning at states or at nationals because the coach didn't help. It's so important that a coach understands what's going on, when it's going on, and what your quiz, you have to give them direction because they have no idea what the score is.
And you have to, you're thinking ahead as a coach. So here's the thing, when they got that question, when my red team, as I'm the red coach, when my team got that question to lock the quiz, I need to be aware of that before they call that question correct. I need to know if we get this right, then we lock it. Because when they say correct, if I start doing the math in my head and the quiz master goes on to the next one, he says question 14 is a 2-part question, at that point it's too late. So once a quiz master identifies the next type of question, you can't call a timeout anymore. So you need to be thinking ahead, and each question you need to be looking and seeing, well, what happens if they get it right? What happens if they get it wrong? And you need to, it's hard sometimes because as a coach, you're also trying to follow along with the material. You're trying to keep track of this and that. But those are the different responsibilities a coach has. You need to be thinking ahead and making sure that you're ready. When that quiz is locked, I'm ready. I'm going to call a timeout right then and jump up there quick. Stand, state, and wait, of course, is how you call a timeout. Stand first, state, contest, and then wait to be identified. But you need to be aware of what's going on to help your team out. You don't want your team to lose a quiz because you didn't know it was locked. It's just not fun to, personally, it's not fun to deal with afterward. You feel bad. You feel like you let your kids down. You don't want to be in that situation. So you want to do what you can to help them win that quiz. All right. Any last questions with the timeouts or any comments? If anyone has anything else that you do? Yeah.
I know that sometimes, it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while I can tell my kids are upset because they've lost a quiz that was either really close or it was extremely spread. So like sometimes they think they're gonna win it and they get upset when they realize they didn't. And sometimes they're upset because they didn't get to buzz in one time because the other team kept getting all the questions. So every once in a while, I'll call a timeout right before the last quiz or even right after the last quiz has been ruled on. And I will use that timeout to kind of give my kids a few seconds to regroup before they go and shake the other quizzer's hands.
Yeah, that's a good point. Watch your quizzer's body language. You don't get to see their face, unfortunately, but if they're dropping their head on the table after they miss a question and they don't pick that head up until midway through the next question, that's a good indication. Maybe you need to call a timeout and let them know. And at the end of quizzes, sometimes it's good to take that time. You might not see your quizzers for the next 20 minutes after a quiz is over, depending on how your team works. Sometimes quizzers will run off and they're running outside, and you might not get a chance to go talk to them and tell them, hey, you guys were this close, and that was a really good team. Look how well you guys did. And so it's good to keep an eye on your quizzers and see how they're reacting. And sometimes you gauge your timeouts off of how they react to things.
When I coached in juniors, I had some quizzers, I think of Aiden West, for instance, where if we needed the last 3 questions to win, I would call a timeout. I would say, Aiden, we need the last 3 questions to win. I want you to take some chances. I want you to buzz in earlier than you would have otherwise done. And he would have said, okay, and then he would have done it. He would have just gotten the last 3 questions, and he won more quizzes than I can remember doing that. I had another quizzer, though, Grayson Holloway, who was also a phenomenal quizzer. And if I told him that, it wouldn't have gone well. And so you have to know the personality of your quizzers. If putting more pressure on them doesn't make them perform better, then calling that timeout and saying you need the last 3 is actually hurting you. But if you know that actually motivates your young people to say, I want you to take a chance, and if you don't get it, that's okay, but we need these to win, it's gonna make a difference at your tournaments.
All right, we'll move on to the next topic, contests. How to handle contests as a coach. First of all, your quizzers need to be, you want to make sure before a quiz that they know the proper procedure, the stand, state, and wait. Once they do it at the tournament, then it's usually too late at that point. So make sure that they know ahead of time how they're supposed to do that. Even some of the quizzers that have quizzed for half a year and you feel like, oh, I'm sure they know it by now. Sometimes they surprise you and they forget because there's a lot of pressure on them. And they stand up, and it's scary sometimes to stand up there and say contest. So I run over that 100 times with my quizzers before I go to a single tournament. Make sure they know exactly what they're doing when they contest.
Everything about contests are found in the rule manual, so please read the rule manual. That'll show you how to do it.
When you are bringing a contest down, so first of all, you get to decide if you want your quizzer to bring a contest down or if you want to, assuming they bring back a good contest that you feel like has a chance of getting granted. I usually would let any chance I get to let my quizzers take the contest down. That was always my preference because we're here for them. So I want them to grow in any way that they can. But there are times when a beginner quizzer would contest and he would come back and say, that didn't sound right. And I'm thinking, well, that's because they put the noun in this spot and it should have been here. And I'm not going to send my quizzer down in that case for a beginner quizzer. In that case, I might just bring it down myself. But if you as a coach are bringing down a contest, you want to, first of all, you want to be specific about what you're contesting about. And this is really for quizzers too. You want to let your quizzers know. Even at state finals, in the experience division last year, we had multiple times where quizzers came down on quotation questions and they said, I'm pretty sure that they quoted that verse wrong. Can you just listen to it? And they left it at that. And as officials, we said, no, we're not going to listen to it and try and find things wrong. We want you to bring down and let us know what they did wrong. And if you're close, if you say, I know they stumbled, I don't remember if it was between the second and third or the fourth and fifth word, that's okay. At least we know then what you're doing. But bring down something specific and let us know where you think that they missed something, and that will help your chances of the officials talking about it.
We even saw that at nationals. Coaches, please write this down. Your quizzer cannot bring down a contest saying, I thought they quoted wrong. Please. They have to say what word was quoted wrong, or what phrase was quoted wrong, or did they start the verse wrong or end the verse wrong. You have to actually be specific. In other words, it's not the job of the officials to do the quizzer's job. The quizzer has to do the work to form a logical contest, and so they have to listen specifically. And so bringing down a contest that's just saying, can you listen to the recorder? I think they quoted it wrong. That's fishing, and that's going to be denied every time.
So along those same lines, a lot of times what happens is a quiz master will go down and they'll talk to the judges and they'll be talking for a while, and then they come back and make a ruling, and then there's the contest. And when it's brought down, a lot of times what's said is very obvious. Well, they said hands instead of hand. Well, if that was like the very obvious thing that was said, and the quizmaster already talked about that with the judges, they're probably not going to discuss it much further. You need to tell the judges something that they haven't already been talking about. Because if they're doing their job right, they should be ruling based on the information at hand. Just having one more person say, yeah, I think that should have been wrong, that's not going to be enough to sway them and say, oh, well, that coach thought it was wrong. Maybe we will call it wrong instead. So you need to come down and give the officials something, give them a different point of view, or give them just something that they haven't already discussed. And you may not know what they're discussing, and so if you think they might be discussing something else, then that's fine. But you want to bring them something different than what they've already been talking about. So don't be offended if you go down and you say, they clearly said hands instead of hand. Well, the officials probably, if it was that clear, then the officials probably caught it, and they probably already discussed it, and they know what their feeling is on it. So if that's all you have to say, then don't be offended if they don't talk about it for another 10 minutes, because they've already discussed it. The officials don't want to waste anyone's time. If they're talking for a long time, it's because they really want to get a call right, but they're not going to talk about it just to talk about it. So you want to bring down something different that they haven't already discussed, or a different point of view. And that kind of goes along with that, with those quotations. You just want to be specific and give them something to look at and something that they can talk about to see. With your contest, the one other thing I will say that I've seen coaches do sometimes, and I am absolutely 100% guilty of this as a coach. I've done this. Sometimes you get a little nervous and you take it down and you will state your contest 4 different times, and you just keep saying this, you keep saying it, and then you get done, and then you start kind of repeating, and then you're done, and then you're like, well, let me just, so to conclude, and then you start saying it again, and that's okay. It's nerves. It happens. Just something kind of I thought I'd throw out there to be aware of, because we do get that, and I've done that over and over. I'm absolutely guilty of repeating myself. So, question.
I just wanted to say we learned this lesson a lot, what you're talking about the hard way 2 years ago at Nationals. And there was a contest on a question, and it was about the pronunciation of a word. And if we would have thought about it longer and been more prepared, of course, how do you prepare something like that? The way that we contested it and went down and spoke to the judges about it would have probably made a difference, because afterwards, we looked it up, Megan and I did, because ask her about this, she'll remember. And the pronunciation meant 2 different things, depending on the way you said it. If we would have presented it in Wikipedia, if we would have presented it that way, it probably would have been granted, but we didn't. So what you're saying about being very specific, I've already started this year, we were looking up words and how they're pronounced and what they mean according to the pronunciation, because something's very similar can mean 2 different things. And if you go down and present it the right way, you might have a different outcome, rather than just saying they pronounced it wrong and this is the way it's pronounced in the Bible, whatever. So it was a good lesson learned on that.
That's a good story. And another thing I took away from that story is be prepared and have things with you. As a coach, don't go up there to coach with nothing in hand. Have something with you. We live in a good time, because now we can just pull out our cell phones and pull up the internet a lot of times and look things up. So like in that story, if they had a chance to just pull it up on their cell phones before they took a contest down, and they can look up the pronunciation of a word and bring it down, and you can show the officials, that doesn't hurt your cause, especially if you see that they haven't looked it up yet. If you bring down, on multiple occasions last year, we pulled up the Greek on a cell phone and looked up the Greek word to understand the meaning of what was behind it. And it's nice to have materials there. So as a coach, keep that in mind. That's something you can do to help yourself and your team.
I was just going to ask, so it's okay, it's legal to be looking things up on your phone while you're back there coaching. I didn't know what the rules were on that. Last year at an extravaganza in Charlotte, I remember the girl, she finished the question by saying in several verses of our study, and they counted her right, even though I think they went down and tested it, they denied it, and afterwards she looked it up and she was like to the judges, several means more than 2. And it was only in 2, but they were like, well, if you would have shown us that, and she said, well, we didn't have our phones out. So is it okay to have your phone out there when you're coaching, when you're back there looking things up? Is that
For coaches, sure. There's nothing in the rule book against that. Quizzers, no. But because they could be looking up material, and that's not okay.
So in that event, coach would need to take the contest.
Yeah, if you're going to show, because the quizzers aren't allowed to have that material in hand, just like they're not allowed to walk down with their verses to point things out. So in that case, a coach would want to bring that down.
As a coach, part of your responsibility is to teach your quizzers what is a valid contest. And I teach our quizzers, when I was a coach here, there's 3 reasons you can test. Reason number 1 is you thought you were right, but they called you wrong. Reason number 2 is you think the other team was wrong, but they called them right. And reason number 3 is it was a bad question, or something was misspoken, or it was mislabeled, or something about the question was wrong. And so you teach your quizzers that, and it helps them categorize these things in their mind. You know, just as a side note, if your team gets it right, you cannot contest. I'm not sure why you'd want to, but you cannot contest. And you can contest though if the other team gets it wrong, because maybe it's a bad question and they throw out the question and now you get a fresh one.
I do get that question just about every year. A quizzer can, if your team misses it, but then the other team misses it too, or even just the other team misses it, you can call a contest and have the question thrown out because it can help you get more points. If they miss a 30, that's only minus 15 for them. If you want to get the full 30 points and you need to get it right, you can have a question thrown out if you think it's a bad question. All right, any other questions, comments on contests for the club?
How do you all feel about a multiple point contest where, in other words, you've got 2 things that you say are perhaps issues with it? You know, usually the coach feels stronger about one, but there are times you say, this word was mispronounced, and by the way, it's also mislabeled, or it's a faulty question when it's asked. How do you feel about approaching those?
So the question was, how do we feel about multiple point contests if you have like 2 different points to a contest, bringing those down? I will tell you, for me, I'm perfectly okay with that. There's nothing in the rule book against it. So if you bring it down, as long as they're both specific and none of them is, well, I think they quoted it wrong. So listen to the verse, and also, so kind of like what we said, as long as there are specific points, I don't have anything wrong with that.
If they did 9 things wrong, I want to know all 9. And maybe you're going to be right on 1 of the 9, that's fine.
Another thing that I found with contests, especially when I had newer quizzers, now all my quizzers are kind of seasoned and they know how to contest. But when I had earlier quizzers, they were nervous about contesting, and I found that if I told them, you have to contest something during this quiz. I don't care if there is no contest there, you are going to stand up, you are going to call a contest, and you're going to wait to be called upon. And you're going to bring it back to me, and if I tell you there's nothing, that's fine, you go sit down, but you will contest something in this quiz. Because if you do it in January, February, or March, and they do it wrong, get fouled, that's fine at minus 5 points, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. If you do that during your final quiz, they stand up and contest because they finally have a valid contest, and they do it wrong, they lose 5 points. We lose the contest anyway. Now we've potentially lost a quiz over something as silly as a technical foul. So I found, make them contest, like even if they have no reason to contest, even if they don't know like the specifics of how to contest, make them do at least the motions of it, because then it becomes familiar to them.
I agree 100% with that, and absolutely have done that with all of my quizzers in the past. I will make them contest. If nothing else, the hardest contest that they will probably ever do, the most nerve-wracking one, is the first one. Once they've done it once, a lot of them feel like, well, that really wasn't so bad. I didn't even have to quote a verse or anything. All I had to do was stand and say one word, and I'm done. And a lot of them will realize after that first one, we had one quizzer that was afraid, that wouldn't hit the buzzer at all, was just very afraid of being in front of people. And then we had that quizzer contest, and that was speaking in front of people. And then all of a sudden they were okay hitting the buzzer, because now they've already done they've taken that first step. So I agree 100%. Making your quizzers contest is a very good thing for a coach.
Contesting is the most complicated thing we do in Bible quizzing. And so you have got to practice it. And there's a video on the seniorBibleQuizzing.com website that shows how to contest. When do you stand up? When are you allowed to turn? When can you talk with your coach? If you sit back down, are you allowed to get back up? All of those things matter. And that's one of the reasons you want your strongest quizzer to be your captain, because they have to field every contest that your team makes.
Yeah. And like she said, the more they do it, the easier it's going to be for them. So it's good to get that practice in. Any other contest questions, comments? Brandy?
One other thing about forcing them to contest is sometimes in a quiz, if you know that the other team gets the next question, you might tell your quizzers, no matter what, if they get this right, contest. Because they might not have a contest, but you might. So you might use that as
You can also throw the other team off. Like if they're in a momentum, without using a timeout or without using another timeout, you can throw their momentum off. If a quizzer sees, and you have to have a strong quizzer to be able to do this, but if you have a good captain and they see that they keep getting momentum, contesting even when there's nothing there can kind of make the other team a little bit nervous because, wait, what did I do wrong? And help to second guess themselves.
Just to kind of repeat for the camera, since I don't think Randy would have been picked up, he mentioned that sometimes it's okay to tell your quizzers that then the other team gets the next question right, then I want you to contest no matter what, because you may have a contest that they don't, or you may think of something that they don't, and that's part of your responsibility as a coach, is to know what things need contested. If there's something that's wrong, if a quizmaster calls something wrong that they shouldn't have, or they call something right that they shouldn't have, we want that to be brought up. So it's okay to do that. It's okay to tell your quizzers they have to contest in a certain situation when the quiz is about to be locked. It's okay to use that opportunity to correct what's been wrong. All right, we will move on to the next point here. This is an easy one because we don't have a lot of them. Point of orders. A point of order is for the coach only. It's not for the captain. It's not for any of the quizzers. This is for the coach when they feel like something procedurally is not being handled correctly. So this is in no case is it okay to call a point of order on a judgment call, or you feel like the quizmaster called it one way and you think they probably should call it the other way. That is a contest. So contests and point of orders do not overlap. It's one or the other. So the most common things we see with point of orders are if a quizmaster forgets to reread a question that was interrupted and incorrect. That absolutely will happen during the quiz year. And the other one is if a quizzer quizzes out or errors out, and oftentimes the quizmasters they're usually not keeping a running total of how many every quizzer has. They usually do write down who gets it so they can count them up if they need to, but they don't keep a running total. So it's up to the scorekeeper in a lot of those cases, and if the scorekeeper doesn't catch it in time, then that's your job. Stand up and call a point of order and let the quizmaster know if they're not doing something right, or if a quizzer needs to be pulled out of a quiz. Usually, like I said, usually though, the scorekeeper catches those type of things. But if they don't catch it, that's your job. The other thing that point of orders are used for are clarification. And I'm perfectly okay with this as a quizmaster in a lot of cases, and probably there should be more of these, to be honest. If the quizmaster calls something a certain way and you feel like, well, that just doesn't sound right to me, I'm not sure, it's okay to call a point of order and just kind of ask for a clarification and say, are we sure this is exactly how it's supposed to be? Or are you sure that you're not supposed to reread that question since you granted that contest? And it's okay to just kind of ask the quizmaster. You don't get a foul just for kind of asking for some clarification.
Just to jump in there as well, by clarification, we mean procedural related things. So clarifying as in, you deliberated there and I just want to make sure I gave the error to the right person, or who got the -5 points on that one, or so we're throwing this one out. It's not clarifying, why did you rule that way? Why were they wrong? Why was that interruption determined that way? That's what a contest is for. If you think a quizmaster ruled incorrectly, your quizzers have to catch that. Point of order is not for you to lobby for your quizzers, for you to ask, why did you rule that way, to argue for your quizzers. That's not what it's for.
Kind of, and that reminded me with the contest, sometimes one other thing I would do as a coach is that I would tell my quizzers, if something doesn't sound right, then I want you to contest. That's just one other thing I thought of. Sometimes quizzers will hear it and they'll be like, wait, what? That something was wrong there, but they don't know what it was. And sometimes as a coach, you're listening and you know exactly what it was, but sometimes they don't contest because they can't point out exactly. So tell your quizzers, if you hear something wrong, contest and come talk to me about it. Maybe I heard exactly what was wrong. Maybe it was something that was very wrong and we need to bring it down. So that's just another thing.
Another thing that you can do, you can use a point of order to address the sound system, to address some noise in the audience, to address some problem with the microphone. Those are clarification things that are related to the procedure of the quiz that you could use a point of order for.
Especially how the volume is to quizzers up here, it's going to be different to a quizmaster over here. So the quizmaster isn't going to know that. If you can't hear and it's all garbled up there, quizmaster doesn't know that most of the time. Now, if the quizmaster or the quizzer's microphone just goes out, the quizmaster probably knows that and they'll probably take care of it. But it's okay to call a point of order and say, hey, I can't hear you, I can't understand you, can we fix these monitors? Yeah, that's perfectly okay. One other thing that you cannot use a point of order for is anything to do with a foul, with calling or pointing out a foul. You can't use a point of order to say, I'm pretty sure that, you know, the quizzer over here is talking to someone in the audience, and that's not allowed, that's a 5-point foul. Can't do anything like that. That's up to the judges and officials to catch fouls. So no pointing out a foul. Really, and that's somewhere you just have to be careful. If you're calling a point of order, to me, if I'm a quizmaster, if it sounds anything like you're telling me that there should have been a foul on something, even if you don't just say that should have been a foul, if you're saying something, now that was definitely conferring over there. Can we make sure that no one in the audience is conferring? To me, it sounds like you're pointing out a foul. A better way of going about that, if you feel like there are fouls that are happening and they're not being caught, do it during another time, not during a point of order in the middle of a quiz. Come down, especially in between quizzes, please come in fact, I'm asking you, if you think that someone in the audience is mouthing something, I want you to tell me. I would even be okay during a timeout if you come down and just say, just so you know, I feel like someone's mouthing. They may not even realize it. That's something we get fairly often, where quizzers in the audience are mouthing along and they don't realize they're doing it. So they're not doing it to cause a foul. They're not doing it to help a quizzer. They just do it because, hey, I know that verse, and they're quoting along and they're mouthing it, and it could help a quizzer give them an answer. So please let the quizmaster know, but unfortunately, that's not what a point of order is for. You can't let them know in that. Anything that if you're pointing out a foul. Any other questions, comments on that? All right, I got one more thing to talk about, just kind of some of the other responsibilities of a coach during a tournament. Now, when I say other responsibilities, I don't mean all of the other responsibilities, because like we said earlier, most of those come during the practices and during the week, but just some things to do during a tournament, some things to keep in mind. It's your job, for one thing, to make sure that your quizzers know when and where they're supposed to be. That's definitely a coaching role, even if you have parents there. Now, when I'm coaching our junior teams, I will typically let the parents know. Most of the parents that we've had in the past, they're the ones that are watching the kids more. As a coach, luckily I haven't had that where I've had to keep an eye on all of the junior quizzers. So I'll go to the parents in between quizzes and I make sure that they know, all right, in 3 quizzes, we're up and we're going to be in the sanctuary. Just make sure that and I'll tell them, make sure after this next quiz, sometime soon that you get in there and bring your quizzer in there so that they can listen along to a quiz or two. And I'll tell the parents where to be. I'll tell the quizzers in senior quizzing. A lot of times I didn't have any parents there, so I would tell the senior quizzers, you need to be in the room in about 15 minutes so that we're ready when they call us up. And so as a coach, it's your responsibility to make sure that they know when they're supposed to be there and where they're supposed to be. Sometimes they're switching between sessions. help them out, let them know where your quiz is going to be. And if you do that, everything goes smoother. When we never have to wait on teams, the tournament goes quicker, you get home quicker, everyone else gets home quicker, so they're all happy. Everybody's happier when everybody shows up. Please don't ever put a quizmaster in the position to have to take away your 10 points for showing up on time. I never want to take away a team's 10 points. But if you're not there on time, then I'm supposed to. So I would prefer that you just never put me in that position to have to take those points away from you and take a chance of you losing by 5 points. And it's just because you had quizzers that were outside running around when it was time for them to quiz. So that's one of your biggest responsibilities during a tournament. You're also there to help encourage your quizzers. You're there for them. This is a competition, and sometimes quizzers can get upset when they miss questions. Sometimes they get overjoyed when they get them right. You're there to kind of help regulate how they're feeling and just to help them out. If they're getting down on themselves, you're there to help pick them up, to encourage them, and to let them know, hey, don't worry about it. So what, you missed that question? That was against the team that took second place in the nation last year. Don't worry about losing a quiz by 1 question to them. Don't worry about it at all. We'll move on to the next one. We'll get the next one. So it's your job to kind of help pick them up and help encourage them, and to make sure that they're in the right frame of mind when they get up there to quiz. That's another thing about keeping them, letting them know where they need to be and when they need to be there. If you have to run outside because your quizzers are outside playing tag and tell them, hey, you're up at the board right now, and then they have to sprint in there and jump in the chair, their mind is going to be going in 8 different directions. You're probably not putting your team in the best case for them to win. So you're not helping your team out by letting them, by waiting until the last second to send them in there. And then I think, let's see, probably about the last thing I'll say is, as coaches, if you can help whenever officials are needed, that is always a great help, and once again helps get everybody home quicker. So anytime you're ready to jump in there, especially judging, the opportunity that you have to help judge a quiz as a coach, I love that opportunity. I wanted to do that any chance I got, not because I wanted to be the one that was up there, not because I wanted to be the one making decisions. I wanted to do it because I want to know how that quizmaster thinks. I want any chance I get to judge for Brother Fulbear at a senior tournament. I want to do it, and I want to hear how he reasons and how he decides on things, because that's going to make me a better coach. Then I know in my practices. We had a quizmaster at one point, I won't mention the name, but this quizmaster ruled things. There was a certain type of ruling. They ruled things very differently than the way I felt they should be. I really felt like they weren't, that they had a different mindset on it than I did, and they were calling things very differently. But they were consistent, and that's what's important. It's okay to disagree with the quizmaster. As long as that quizmaster is consistent, that's what's really important. But I disagreed with them. However, because I judged with them a few times, I started to understand, for one thing, why they called it that way. And I was like, okay, I can kind of see that. And I could see that they were consistent in it. And so I knew during practices, you know what, I feel like this should be right, but I'm going to call you wrong because I know the quizmaster is going to call you wrong. And I would call things the way the quizmaster would, so that my quizzers weren't upset at the tournament when all of a sudden they have that exact situation come up and they get called wrong. And they're like, wait, why? You know, that's during practice I would have been right. Well, then during the tournament, we have a different quizmaster. So the opportunity to judge, take advantage of it if it's open. In juniors, we've had some officials that have been there like at all times, and that really does help the tournament flow smoothly. So it's not a bad thing to have permanent officials in there, but especially like in junior quizzing, where you're going to have new quizmasters on the junior level and on the beginner level, take advantage of any chance you get to see how they think and how they call things. It's only going to help you as a coach. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the question and answer session.
All right, thank you, Austin. And so this is a time for you and also for our coaches that are watching at home to submit questions. And so if you have questions about what to do or what not to do, please ask us now. Yes?
I have two questions. The first one is for senior group with the hangout room. Is there an adult that is in there, or is it just the kids that go in there?
The question is, in senior quizzing, we have what we call a quizzer hangout room where we put snacks and drinks in there and the quizzers can fellowship. Adults are allowed in there, but most of the time there aren't adults in there. It's primarily the quizzers. And so we do ask the adults to monitor your quizzers, know what they're doing, know where they are. And we've had a few instances where quizzers did not take that privilege and treat it well, and they would leave things behind in the room and or leave a mess, and we've had to address those things. But in general, no, there aren't usually adults in there. And so please know where your quizzers are and instruct them accordingly.
And then my other question is I'm still relatively new to quizzing, and we are still trying to figure out how to work. The pastor and I have been talking about how to work practices into ministries that are already going on. And we've tried a couple of different ways, and I told him that when I came here, I would ask to get people's opinion on how, when they do their quiz practices, if it conflicts with other ministries, or we just need some input.
So the question is, how do you run your quiz practices? When do you run them? Do you join them with other ministries within the church? There are so many different ways. We'll probably have 10 different versions of it in this room alone. Typically at Dublin, what we've done is we don't merge them with other ministries, and we do quiz practice 45 minutes before church on Sunday and 45 minutes before church on Wednesday. And so that way, by the time church starts, those kids can be involved in all the same activities that the other kids are. There are some churches who make quiz practice one of the Sunday school classes. And so they aren't in the same Sunday school classes as the other students, but that's a convenient time to have only a quiz practice. There are other churches that have quiz practice on off nights of the week. And so it's a Monday evening or a Tuesday evening. They'll take 2 hours because they have more time availability as opposed to doing 45 minutes or 1 hour on a service day. Is there anyone else that does it differently than any of those? Sister Balance?
Well, I was just going to comment on that. We've tried it, I think, every way. And having it, what I found in our church, having it during Sunday school, although it was very convenient for the quiz family, it seemed to create a disconnect with our kids and the other kids. And it also, maybe even a little, the feelings of, oh, that's the quizzing. You know, that's the elite group, and they're not in our Sunday school, they're not, because we've done during Wednesday night power, they're always in their own group, they're better than us. It created with the little children especially, a disconnect. And so we didn't find that it worked real well for us. And then on the flip of that, we do Wednesday nights before service for the senior quizzers, but then we do the children during the service on Wednesday night, because the seniors, we don't want to do them during service because Wednesday night is their youth, so that's sort of their Sunday school. But we didn't want to do it on Sunday mornings because that's their time with their pastor. And I think having it during the service can create a disconnect, unless if it's during Sunday school time. We found that for our younger ones, it works okay on Wednesday nights because they're still going to Sunday school on Sunday mornings. But we really had a lot of issues. It seemed like the year that we tried to do it during Sunday school, it just didn't work real well. Even with the Sunday school staff, it was kind of like they felt almost in an unintentional offensive way. You're pulling them out of my class. You think this is more important,
Right. So for those at home, the comments that are being made is that sometimes when you separate the quizzers from the other children at your church, if you separate quiz practice from Sunday school or from different youth services, then that doesn't foster unity within your Sunday school, and there might be some feelings that the quizzers are being given a special treatment, or they're a separate group or an elite group, and it doesn't foster great church unity in some cases. What other questions can we think of? One thing thing that Brother Span had brought up that I wanted to also touch on was, even if you do disagree with a quizmaster or a coach, please speak favorably of the leadership before your quizzers, because if they see that you don't respect authority, then they won't either. And if they see that it's okay for you to speak negatively about the quizmaster or the pastor of the church, and this is really for all things in life, then you're not really teaching them that respect for authority that we know that is very important. Hebrews 13:7 and 17. Obey them that have the rule over you and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls as they that must give an account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. Remember them which have the rule over you. These are principles that you can teach them, and so you're teaching your quizzers as much about life as you are about Bible quizzing. And so even if you disagree, take the high road, discuss it in private, bring it to the quizmaster directly, but please don't gossip around your quizzers. Yes?
Are there any major changes to either of the rule manuals this year?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. The question was, are there any major changes to the rule manual? And I can't speak on the senior side. Unfortunately, I don't have enough knowledge about the newest junior manual. There's one major change to the senior manual, and I'm going to give you the scenario. A team interrupts, they're correct. The other team contests, and it's granted. In the past, that meant that the question was closed, and the ruling was reversed. The other team got negative points instead of positive points, and then you just moved on to the next question. Now, about 2 to 3 years ago, that changed. A team interrupts, correct. You contest, granted, and then that question was thrown out altogether. And in the new rule manual, the way that it works is a new question of a similar point value and similar question type is chosen to be read to just the team that got the contest granted. That's a completely different ballgame. So it was, in the past 2 to 3 years, it was thrown out and a new question was given to everybody. But now, interrupted, correct, you contest, it's granted, you get your own personal reread, but it's not the same question. It's going to be a question, similar point value just for you. We've never had anything like that before. And so that's important to know, and it's also something that you might find to use a point of order for. Maybe a quizmaster that you're seeing at that tournament, hopefully not in Ohio, but maybe a quizmaster that you're using in Ohio or another district doesn't know the new rule. It's your responsibility to have a rule manual on hand to recognize that situation. So that was the major change.
And that's just for seniors?
Just for seniors. Other questions? Yes?
Situation one time where we were at a tournament. My kids weren't answering questions, they were the buzzers in. I knew they knew the answers. And 3 questions in, they're getting all wiggly. I called a timeout, found out the buzzer system wasn't working. What would have been the proper way to
Yes.
put that before?
The question is, so the coach brought up a scenario where you were at a tournament, you started a quiz, you got partway through the quiz, and then you realized that the buzzers of your quizzers were not working. What do? In that case, what I would do is use a point of order. I would say, sir or ma'am, whoever the quizmaster is, our buzzers aren't working. Can you test them? They test them. They realize the buzzers weren't working. You throw out the quiz. You start a new quiz.
I don't know if this, just as a coach too, let your quizzers know if that ever happens, because it's going to happen at some point this year. One of the buzzers isn't going to work properly. Let your quizzers know to call a contest when that happens and tell the coach. Some quizzers don't know to do that. They'll wait, and then you'll get to the end of the quiz and they'll say, oh yeah, my buzzer didn't work that quiz. And at the end of the quiz, there's nothing you can do about it. So tell your quizzers, call a contest, tell your coach, and then you withdraw the contest and call the point of order, and we'll test the buzzer.
Now, that doesn't always mean throwing out a whole quiz. If the quizzer had been buzzing at other points during the quiz, and then it was just an isolated incident at the end, we might just replace that one question. But in general, teach your quizzers that the contests are a tool in your tool bag, and you should use them if you feel like something is wrong. Worst case scenario, the contest is denied. You've got 2 denied contests, 2 granted contests, and 2 unlimited granted contests, and 2 withdrawn contests. Questions? Any others? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the 2016 Bible Quizzing Workshop. And so on behalf of the Ohio District and the Promotions Division of the General Youth Division, we're looking forward to 2016 and the unashamed material selections from Romans and James. Have a safe drive home. You're dismissed.